Okay, so we're looking at painting the model that we prepped in the last video. So we'll just have a look at what we'll need. So I've got clean water. It's an old mug, so yeah. And I've also got an old brush for taking the paint out of the pot and not using the brushes that we're actually using to paint to do that. So it's been sat in the mug for a while, so you can see the bend on it. Don't leave your brushes in your paint pot, okay? That's what will happen. You'll lose all shape of the brush will go. This was a cheap nasty brush anyway, so once it sort of did its purpose, I've then just used it. So that's it. Next thing that's very helpful is a palette. Again, this has seen some use, so it's got a bit of staining on it, but it is quite helpful. It's got little divots in it, just almost little pools. So I highly recommend one of them. 3 brushes that I'll be using in this are these I got off of Amazon. I don't really get on with Games Workshop brushes all that much. I'm not sure why. I don't know if the bristles are too long or they've just not got enough strength to them. I don't know. I've tried over the years and I just struggle to sort of get the detail that I want. So I'll be using a 2, a 0 and a 3-0 for painting this guy. I think the standard brush you get with Games Workshop hobby starter sets and that sort of stuff it's around about the size of a 0. So it's almost big enough that you can do basing with, base coating with, and if you have got some good control and good flow off of the brush, you can do detail with it, so it is a good size. So I've got my paints lined up, and then the last thing that I only started using this about a year ago, maybe 18 months now, is Flow Improver. So what I'll do is I've decanted it into a little dropper bottle. I'll put some on my palette just off to the side, and then as I start painting, I'll put the brush into the Flow Improver. That can then fill the bristles nearly to the top, get my point on it, and then go to the paint, because with that Flow Improver in the brush, it stops the paint from travelling all the way up the brush into the I think you call it a bevel, because if paint gets up to that point and it travels further in, then that's it, the shape of the brush will just go. You can't clean it out, and you've just lost it. Whereas if you keep it loaded with Flow Improver, not only does it help get the paint off the brush and onto the model, it also helps stop the paint from heading up the brush and drying out. So it's not something that you have to use. You could do that with water. I probably wouldn't use Lamy Medium because it's a pigmentless paint, so that will dry as well. And it is also a lot more expensive than Flow Improver. I've not tried drying retardant. You could probably use that instead, because it'd have the same effect of stopping the paint from drying in the brush. But with a lot of this, just experiment, see what you're comfortable with, and go from there. So we'll go with the first colour, give it a good shake. We're starting with Abaddon Black. So after I've shaken it up, and take your loading brush, get that free of any excess water, and then just grab what you need. So that should do us. And then you can close the pot. And the other benefit from this is, as I found in my youth, is if you've got an open pot, it can get knocked over. Load up what you need onto your pallet. You can then close your pot. You can always open your pot again. Whereas even if you've got an open pot next to you, if you want to reach for the model, the glue, the flow improver, oh, I've just knocked it over. Now I've lost a load of paint and made a mess. So just one of those things. Right, so again, with your loading brush, get a good amount of water on, and then just start mixing it up. Now, Abaddon Black is a base colour. If you were to apply this straight to the model, you'd lose detail. It's just how it is. It's just too thick a paint to go straight on. So give it a mix down, and then you can see how it behaves off to the side. It should be quite flowy, and it's difficult to show you because it's black. But the water lets the paint move around a lot easier. Whereas if it was just paint, you could tip it from side to side and it wouldn't really go anywhere. With the water in, it does move around a bit more. So yeah. So going with a 2O brush into the flow improver, just to load up bristles. Now this will thin your paint down even more. Okay, so that's why it's important to get your brush loaded and then take out the excess. I'd use tissue paper if you've got it, or you don't generally need to use your hand. Some people stick stuff in their mouths, some people paint their hands. Health and safety would probably have a fit if they saw half the videos on YouTube about miniature modelling and all that sort of stuff, but well, we'll just try and fly under the radar for the time being. Probably want us to wear oven mitts or something just in case the sword on some guy accidentally falls over and stabs us. It's a bit of a rant. Health and safety's just gone a bit mad. So just put it on. You can see it's a thin coat, and that's fine. Getting a thin coat on first, it helps you see the detail of the model, because already it's collecting in there, and it just helps you get to know what the model's like. But with the paint this thin, it's not collecting so much that the detail will start going. If you were to put paint straight from the pot on and it was to settle into the recesses, you wouldn't have any more recesses. Could use a bigger brush than this if you want. I've seen people use, of all things actually, large dry brushes to apply paint, because they hold so much paint, wet paint, that they can load it up, ram it in, spread it all around, and any excess will then get picked up by the brush again. I personally wouldn't recommend it. You could possibly use a size 3 brush to make it quicker. But one of the benefits about using a brush around about this size, a size 2 brush, is you are applying it at a steady pace, but it also lets you get to know the model, because you'll be working your way around. So as I'm putting paint on now, I can see that there's a strap going around for his armour, and if you were just slapping it on, you wouldn't be noticing those sort of details to remember later, right, there's straps there, there's armour sections here, all that sort of stuff. So what I've done there is I've just laid a little pool for myself that I'll then use to spread out, so it's not holding all of the paint on the brush. You've almost made yourself a mini palette. You can also do that on the base if you wanted to. I tend to do it in some of the blockier areas that I know that a wash will sit in anyway. Okay, so that's the first coat done. So I'm going to leave that to dry for a minute. I'll wash my brush out. If you notice your brush is getting dry while you're painting, rinse it out, and then it stops it from drying right to the core. Okay, so clean the brush out. At this point, you can use some tissue or dental health and safety. You can stick it in your mouth. Just take out the excess and also help regain that point. So we'll leave that for a minute and then we'll come back. Okay, the first coat's dried. We're going to continue on. If your paint on the palette is starting to get a bit dry or a bit too thick, just touch it up with a bit more water, give it a mix, then you'll be good to go again. So touch more flow improver. keep moving the model around, have a look at it from different angles, and then I'll just help in case there's any spots that are a bit thin or anything that you've missed. Okay, so we've got that base coated black now. So next we'll move on to the armour. There's a few different painting schemes I've seen for the, say, Tau Cardra, or Sept, I think it is. Games Workshop say to use the Fang and then build it up. Some of the artwork I've seen on a Google search shows up more towards Russ Grey or Fenrisian Grey. It is sort of up to debate, because I mean, I think the Fang is a bit too blue. I think Fenrisian Grey is a bit too light. If you did want to go for Russ Grey and then Fenrisian Grey, I've got a how to paint Space Wolves step-by-step video that's using those colours, so you could apply the techniques in that to paint in the armour. After having a look around, I actually found that I think Thunderhawk Blue will give quite a good effect to it, and it will probably be easier for first time painters or beginners, as the Games Workshop using the Fang, they talk about recess shading, which is a bit of a hard thing to do for new painters. I think shading is probably the best step to go for, just like all over washes. So that's what I'm going to do in this one. So again, just watering down the Thunderhawk Blue. It's a layer paint, so it won't need as much to thin it down. And again, you're aiming for two thin coats. So that's that. I'm going to stick to the 0 for this 0 size brush. And do my best to keep this all in frame. So you can look at the artwork online or on the box. I've not seen any Games Workshop Tau boxes that have got this colour scheme on it. I would have thought it had been in the Codex, but I've not got the most recent one, so I couldn't be sure. Try and stick to the arm panels, but you want to make sure that you get all of the edges. Okay, so I'll try and demonstrate on this a bit more to improve it. So as you're painting, as your brush goes around the edges, it actually leaves an area here. Now at the top that's not too much of a step, but down to the bottom it is quite a big step. Now if you were to go over, and even if you're touching onto the jumpsuit underneath, that's fine, because we can touch that up later, because it's still base coat of black. But as a guide to help us out later on, I found this especially more evident and easier to apply on Death Guard, where you've got the edging on the shoulder pads, and it's not always that easy to pick out the right line. Well, if you were to go around with a shade, it'll actually show you where the line is, and then wherever it's darker in that recess, you can then just paint up to that. So I'll get this armour done, get a couple of layers on, and then I'll show you how the wash is applied. To show you as an example, I've left the brush gathering paint. Okay, once you get to that stage, or before it preferably, get it cleaned out. So I'll run some foam improver through it just to help break it down a bit. You can see all the pigment coming out. If you leave it too late, eventually that will get hardened in the centre of the brush, and then it won't be any use for anything other than scooping paint out of pots. So once we're back to having a good point, we can carry on. Okay, so we're going to let that dry and we'll come back and put a second coat on. Okay, so we've got the base coat for the armour done now. So I've actually gone around and given that 3 coats where it's needed it. But it's better to be putting on multiple thin layers than too few thick layers and end up losing detail. So we'll let that dry and then we'll come back and put the wash on. Okay, so we're going to wash it in Nuln Oil. So giving it a good shake. And I'll actually thin this down. You can thin washes down with water. I believe you can use Lamy medium as well. But what I do use is a bit of flow aid in the brush, again just to stop it from rising too high in the bristles. So get that loaded up. And then with a number 2 brush, or if you've got one, a wash brush. Now with this we're going to be going all over what we've done. You notice the wash sits in the recesses. Now just keep moving it around, don't let it pull too much. But you do want it to help show up the panel lines. And this is where you'll find with a lot of the older sprues, the older models, that if you are missing any detail, this is when it will show up. So for instance, on this armor panel here, so I'm just moving it backwards and forwards, just trying to find where those recesses are. And you can see that they're barely showing up. So there should be one going across here, one going across here, one going across here. You can see that from the manufacturing process, we have actually lost the definition on these lines. That's alright, because we can put them in when we go around and do the black touch up. But keep moving it around. So you can see there it's settled into the panel line, and then just going around and moving off the excess with your brush, and then topping up lines if they need it. By helping the wash find its place in the recesses, and then when your brush is almost empty, just going over again and almost picking up that excess, just moving it away, helps avoid darkening the armour too much, which then sometimes you can end up with like a coffee staining effect, or the armour going a bit too dark, and then you might want to try and brighten it up again, but because it'll have that shade on there quite unevenly, it's very difficult to try and blend it back together. With a lot of this, it's just getting a bit of practice, finding out how the paint behaves, and it's the same for different brands as well, with the exception of white not behaving from any of the brands whatsoever. You'll see how like scale 75 paints behave. I found that they're quite good, and Games Workshop ones for the most part are good. There's a couple of colours where they could do with fixing it a bit, like the Orphan Grey gets quite grainy, white especially is grainy, so it's quite easy to sort of lose a pot of paint to that. Once it gets a bit of age behind it, almost becomes unusable because you just can't break up those lumps. Some people transfer them into dropper bottles to extend the life of the paint because it can dry out. Now, the Games Workshop pots are a lot better for that now. They don't dry out near as quick as they used to for the hexagon pots. But I've got Games Workshop paint going back to the 90s and it's still wet, and they're flip top lids, so you don't feel that you have to drop them into dropper bottles. You just need to keep an eye on them and make sure that you don't get a build up of paint at the back of the pot, because that can then prevent it from closing properly. But if you stick to the technique of taking out the paint you need and then closing the pot, that will reduce that build up. You can see there that the recess, because I've not had that much on the brush, hasn't dropped in quite right. So just with a loaded brush, just using your point, just drop a bit more in, then brings those lines out for you. Now, that is kind of like recess shading, except for the benefit with this is because we've gone over the whole thing, it helps it all flow a lot better. So just check around, make sure there's no pooling and no areas that are missed, anything that you think needs topping up, any lines that aren't quite showing up as good as they could do, you can just drop a little bit more in, and since it's starting to dry it should hopefully stay where you put it. So I'll just try and do this with the wash now, and if it doesn't work I can always go for the black. Okay, so that's going to need a good amount of time to dry, so I'm going to leave that for tonight and I'll come back to it tomorrow. Okay, so the next colour we're going to go with is back to Abaddon Black. You shouldn't need too much of this. It's just to go around and touch up where we've gone a bit over, painting the Thunderhawk Blue, just tidy up the panel lines. So, flurry back on. I'm going with the size 0 brush again. So just get that flurried, take the excess off. So anywhere on the jumpsuit that it's got a bit on it, I'm going to follow that line round. Where you've put the wash on will help show up exactly where the edge of the panel is. Okay, so we can see the inside of his leg, just following that line round, just tidying up. So you can see we haven't really got the lines that we wanted, so just thinning down your black and get a good point on your brush. That'll just help bring it out. So don't go too heavy-handed. You can leave it if you want to, because we can bring it out a bit with highlight later on. When you're starting off, just go through what you're comfortable with. Don't try and jump straight into the deep end. Get practice doing your base coats, getting your washes sorted out, seeing how the paint behaves, and then you can gradually build it up. While you're doing this, anything that you need to have black will go around and pick that up as well. If you use any kind of spray paint, and even sometimes with airbrushing, it's always worth, if you're going to be painting something black and you've spray painted it black, just thin down Abaddon Black or whichever black you're going to use, give it a thin coat. Then if you don't need to make any corrections, it's Abaddon Black that you're correcting. Whereas if you try and correct a spray painted black with Abaddon Black, it's not going to look the same and it will stand out. And throughout this, because I wanted a bit more control of what's on my brush, or when I need to have a good point or know how much I've got on the brush, so there's quite a lot of paint on that. If you put it down and just twist it, you can get rid of the excess and maintain your point. Okay, so just thin that down again. So you can pick up a little bit and then just so you know how much you've got on your brush. Just give it a little dab. You can see how runny it is, how much you got on the brush, and then you know if you need to pick up more so it's not so thin, or keep rubbing it to reduce how much you've got on your brush. Okay. The next colour we're going to go for is Skavenblight Dinge. This will be the colour we're going to do for the jumpsuit. So it's layer paint, won't need loads of thinning down. You shouldn't need too much of it. Okay, now I've got some black that's been mixed into the Fleshshade from when I've been adding a bit of thinner to what I've been working with. Because it's still quite a dark colour, you can still use that little gathering of Fleshshade. If you were working on say a brighter colour, yellow, even a red, go with a fresh bit, because you don't want the black to change the colour. So what we're going to do is going to pick out all of the ridges and bumps on the jumpsuit. Now if you want to, you could paint the whole thing Skavenblight Dinge. Just be careful around the armour panels, and then give it a wash with Nuln Oil again, and then when the wash sits in the recesses, you'll get that peak and trough highlight. Now at this stage of modelling, you can have a bit of artistic license and say, right, his boots completely go over his hoofs, or feet, however you want to think of it, and that's up to you. That's what I'm doing in this one. So I'm not painting his hoofs and the skin separately, I'm just doing it as if he's completely covered up. Okay, so just to help save on cost, because paints are expensive, what we're going to do is we're also going to do the black edge highlighting with Skavenblight Dinge. Now, if you want, you can get Mephiston Grey, and then you can distinguish between the two, but for this, just to save you having to get the extra colour for quite a small amount, just stick with Skavenblight Dinge. So for this, you're just using the tip of the brush, just so it's having a nice flow off the tip, and you're just tracing around the panel lines. It's nice small movements. Don't try and paint one big long line, because you'll waver as you move the model around out of the way. So a nice steady grip, and a little bit of a time. It also lets you see how it's coming off the brush. If it needs a bit more, just go back and just build it up. Now for this sort of thing, just while you've not got much on your brush, so that's getting near empty, just with the side of your brush, just very lightly drag it over. Now if you've got a lot of wet paint in your brush, that will then run and fill in all of these lines. That's not what you want. You want it. Top tip, if you ever make any videos, make sure you've got storage capacity and that you don't fill it up. So I've lost a little bit just finishing off the highlighting for this Skavenblight Dinge, so I'll see how much I've lost during editing. But so that's it. Once we've done the Skavenblight Dinge, and now we're going to work on Mephiston Red. I need a very small amount of this. Okay, so a bit of fresh fleshshade in a bright colour, and we're going to go with the 3A brush now. So just picking up a little bit, test out your tip. So we're going to be working on the islands and also the targeter. Okay, so two lenses. Now some of the helmets are different, some have got more lenses than others, and then the front and back of the target on his rifle. Okay, so following that we're going to go with Trollslayer Orange. Back to the size 0 brush for this one. Okay, so we're going to do the emblem on his shoulder. It's going to take a few coats with it being layer paint over black. Okay, now you can switch to your smaller brush for this if you want. I'm just going to put a couple of lines on the side of his helmet. Also the same lines on his rifle. Now I've messed this shield up a bit, this emblem. So once I've finished with the orange, I'm going to tidy it up with the black just to get the edging right. I'll let that first coat dry and I'll come back and do the rest. So switching over to the 3.0 brush, what I'm going to do is just put the bottom of the lens, just a little bit of this orange. Just make sure you haven't got too much on your brush and it's flowing off nicely. And again, you don't have to do this if you don't want to. Just on the bottom of the targeter. Okay, so that's all the orange done there. At that stage, if you wanted to stop, you could do. I'm going to carry on. I'm going to start highlighting the armour panels. So for that, I'm going to use Russ Grey. So going in with 3.0 brush, again just play with it until you get the right amount that you want on your brush. Shouldn't be too much. And then we're just going to go around the edges of the armour panels. So to keep myself steady, I've got one in my hand and I'm braced against with my other hand. So it's just the slightest movement with my fingers to move the point of the brush. Wherever you can, try and use the side of the brush for putting highlights on, for edge highlighting. This will help keep a more consistent amount. So we've got the corner of the panel here, so just using the edge of the brush, put quite a fine line on. If you find the edge isn't quite defined enough, like that was, just go back in with your point, just to neaten it up. Just make sure you keep your bristles wet, don't let any build up, because on a very small brush it's really easy for it to dry out. And then you'll struggle to get a consistent definition on your lines. Okay, so got the armor panels lined up. Okay, so the next colour we're looking at is Retributor Armour. This is just a small detail. So taking 3A brush. This is a small amount that I'm just taking a few dollops. That's the pot with the brush. Thin it down. And then this just goes onto the coil at the end of the rifle. Okay, that's it. Next colour we're going to use is Stormvermin Fur. So again, going in the 3O brush. And then this is just to put a bit more of a highlight onto the jumpsuit. So we're just picking out the highest points just so they stand out. So you can do as much or as little of this as you want. Comes to highlighting the back panels of the rifle, I'm just going for the top edges. I'm just going to go for Reikland Fleshshade. Switching to a size 0 brush. Get a very small amount of this. This is just for the gold, so if you wanted to you could do it with Nuln Oil. You just find that Reikland Fleshshade helps complement the gold, particularly Retributor Armour. Okay, then on to Lugganeth Orange. Back with a 3O brush. Just very small amount of the lens. It's like a dot. Same for the targeter. I'm not going to do it on the other side because it'd be very difficult to get in there and also to see it. You want this sort of detail to be seen. And then just at the edge of the panel, onto Fenrisian Grey. Okay, I'm just picking out the sharpest upper corners of the armour. You don't have to do this if you don't want to. It's just to amplify the highlight that we've already got. Okay, next in with Liberator Gold, and this is just to put a bit of a highlight on the Retributor Armour. Okay, next in with White Scar. Okay, and for this we're just going for small dot. So just at the top of the targeter and on the lens. Just put a little bit of a grid onto the scanner, which we're then going to go over with Waystone Green. Now that Waystone Green, you could use that, or you could use green wash, green shade, or if you want it to be a blue, you could go with blue wash. You can do this over silver if you want to, instead of white. Now it will wash out a lot of that white that we've just put on. But it's just giving it a little bit of a greenish hue, make it look like it's switched on. So this is the finished model. It's turned out okay, and I've used as few colours as possible just to sort of get you started off with. The scanner, you don't need to do that if you don't want to. It's a technical paint, and it is such a small area that, you know, if you wanted to wait before investing in those sort of paints, you know, that's fine. Go as far as you want to. You gradually build it up. So get your base coats, get your washes, and then you can start building it up as you do more and more. Don't feel as though you need to go straight in and get this sort of detailing straight off. But any questions, let me know, and I'll catch you in the next one.